and the Dalai Lama's government. So that was a very unique relationship. And in the foothills, lower foothills of the Himalayas, especially in this area, where the Bhutanese, the Tibetans, and the Assamese came together, there was also the trade route in this area where Bodo people also came and had that kind of relationship. So that is a relationship that I'm coming about. Today we are discussing how to keep the peace. And that is much easily said than done. And ask me. My country, Tibet, is under Chinese occupation for 75 years. And in 75 years, we have lost 1/6 of Tibetan population. Out of 6 million Tibetans, we have lost 1 million. 10 लाख से ज़्यादा Chinese लोगों ने हमारे देश में मार डाला. और इन्हीं 75 सालों में उन्होंने हमारे पूरे मंदिर तोड़ दिए. आज सुबह, before coming here, I went to see Boro temple here, Batho. And then my friend Gyolang sir, he took me to deeper into the forest, another Batho temple in the forest. So it connected me to Boro people and their worship of nature, the 5 elements. And that same 5 elements are there in Tibet, where before Buddha came, it was the nature worship of the nature, the 5 elements that make the earth. Now, keeping peace either in Boro land or in Tibet, it requires sacrifice, understanding. And both sacrifice and understanding comes from the space of love. Of course, here is much easier because it's a free and independent, it's a democracy. As a refugee, I live in India, I know the value. But in my country, Tibet, I'll tell you how difficult it is. In 75 years, we have lost more than 6,000 monasteries. We have lost 1/6 of the Tibetan population. Every Tibetan family has lost at least a son or a daughter or of parents. I'm born in India, educated here, but I cannot go to Tibet. I'm not Indian citizen. So see, I'm neither Indian nor Tibetan. I have no place to go to. And in Tibet, where the Chinese are living in Tibet for 75 years, today, 3rd generation of Chinese are living, and now they're calling Tibet their own country. Initially, they came to Tibet to say that they're liberating Tibet. Now they're saying Tibet had always been part of China's history. Initially, there was battle by the Tibetans also to resist the Chinese invasion and keep our own country. And slowly it came to our own realization that non-violence is the path. So I'll tell you how we are keeping the peace. Today, do you hear of Tibetan terrorists? No. Do you hear of Tibetan militants? No. Because we understood that freedom is not just raising the flag at the end and say our country. But freedom is now when the struggle is going on. Freedom is now when the struggle is going on. You struggle with peace. You struggle with, however difficult it is. We know the price we paid. And therefore, what we have resorted to is amazing. In the year 2008, when there was a major uprising inside Tibet, we lost more than 500 Tibetans to Chinese bullets. And more than 10,000 Tibetans were arrested and put and tortured and beaten. And some of them are still in jail today. China is mining in Tibet. They are taking lithium, gold, copper, most importantly rare earths that China is exporting to all those countries. They're taking it from Tibet. So entire countries in the world are benefiting from China's trade and supply chain at the cost of Tibet. So Tibet is not only under Chinese occupation, we are under global pressure and trade. So how do we fight? Now what we have learned is there's a very important role that the writers and artists are playing today. What we have started to do is we understand the root of our culture and our language. since the uprising in Tibet, Tibetan youngsters started to understand our culture. Language contains the culture. So every Tibetan speaks perfect, rich, beautiful Tibetan. So that, because the Chinese don't understand Tibetan, our culture is alive. Every young Tibetan. So now the Chinese new development, while I'm talking about it, it is also for you to reflect, how are you going to keep the Boro peace? How are the Boro youngsters going to keep the future of Boro people? And not only Boro, but entire the Assam as a state and India as a country. There is a lot of fascination for Western culture, the globalized manner of consumerism. Today in India, the dangers are not China or Pakistan. Dangers are consumerism, which is going to change people's ways of living. The greatness that is in India is in India's root. And this is what we have realized, that the Tibetan people's strength is the fighting spirit, at the same time the teachings of Buddha that we have learned from India. So this is how we are channelizing our anger into love, our hatred into understanding. Peace does not come from the majority suppressing the minority. Peace comes from the majority's magnanimity. Peace comes from minorities' strength and resistance. Peace comes from the majority losing the ego and the minorities finding the voice. This then, I don't want to speak too much, I'm just closing here. So as a resistance fighter myself, I'm always in support of India, the great country. But greatness of India is in India's unity and diversity. भारत की विविधता भारत की ताकत है. उस विविधता में सभी का भागीदारी है, including the great people and culture of Boro people. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And now may I please invite Professor Strimlet Dakhar from Shillong, Meghalaya. Please give us a peace message. And especially, ma'am, like we belong to the same state of Assam. Now you are from Meghalaya and I'm from BTR, and let us also speak a little bit about the preservation and conservation of our nature, and how do we protect ourselves from the menace of corporate governance also, because this is related to peace also. We should preserve and conserve our indigeneity. We should preserve the resources that we have, the wealth that we have been given by our ancestors to protect, not as an honor, but now we are behaving as an honor, but not as a protector, so that we can again give something to our coming generations.
Okay, well, so very good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me in this session. As I was sitting here for a while, listening to the previous speakers, we understand that Northeast is a place where other dominant state, other dominant people looked at us with huge expectation. But sometimes we are also looked at as savages. So if I could, use the right word. Way back in 30 years ago, let us say, when I attended such kinds of academic programs, literary programs in the nation, different parts of our nation, people used to say, we would like to come to Northeast, but didn't. We are afraid because we are known that Northeast is an insurgent placed. I said, no, it's not that. Even then, I just simply could not give them assurance, 100%, that it's safe to come to Northeast. But then, still I said, no, Northeast is peaceful. But practically, when we travel by night bus from Shillong to Manipur or Shillong to Nagaland or, to other northeastern places, I used to ask, why do we have to wait for all buses to travel together at the same time? Let's say we start from Shillong at 5:30, then all buses will go at the same time. They said, no, it is not safe. Means the drivers themselves, they said, we have to travel together because it's not safe. There are so many anti-social activists on the way that anything can happen. But God forbid, nothing had happened to us. I had been traveling alone. I just shared with my friend Priti just yesterday or day before yesterday while we were journeying from Shillong to this place, that there was a time that I had to travel from Mizoram by night sumo. I was the only passenger with young guys full of, they were already drunk. And I just put my woolen cap and I didn't speak a word. I just sat. I didn't even go for a loo. I didn't even, utter a word till I reached in the morning. Then they realized that I'm not Kapi. I'm not a Mizo lady. I'm somebody else. Anyway, I just told them, thank you, my brothers, because I can't call them sons because they are, at the ages where I could call them brothers. Thank you, brothers, for protecting me the whole night journey. So now when I was the sub-regional coordinators, UGC sponsored programs for capacity building of women managers in higher education. I had to travel and organize programs to so many colleges inside Northeast, and why we did not choose to have in the BTAD area. I just recalled Professor Ashana Sharma. She said, it's better that we don't choose that place. I said, why, ma'am? She said, no, I don't think so. It's a good idea. So she didn't say anything. But nevertheless, when I realized that sometimes we are made to be feared because we don't own the word peace in our heart, in our deeds. And the worst thing that my son has experienced in the serial bomb blast of Guwahati, 2008, that was the time where my son was studying as was studying in Khanapara, veterinary courses, and he said that his very own friend died in that incident. So he was so much afraid, and he said that he may want to come back. I said, no, it's your 5th year, you shouldn't come back. You should be brave, and there will be nothing happening again. So, my collection of poems, Clouds of Emotions, evolved from that kind of incidents. Also, at the same year, 2008, we had also that bomb blast at Mumbai, the terrorist attack, rather. So, to me, I was thinking, we were just victims of innocence and at any point of time. But then, again, as human, I used to ask myself, do we have the sense of humanity? personally, do our own family have to teach our own children to be at peace with one another in the locality, in the villages, in the city, in the workplace, and so on and so forth. And then I used to ask also a question, do the state governments, each state governments, have also the power, if I don't say the power, means the responsibility to maintain and to sustain peace in our own each state, so that our own people will be saved, and we will also make other people also who comes to our place safe. So when ma'am asked me to also talk a little about how to preserve our own forefathers' wealth, I would say wealth, because now we are talking, when we talk about wealth, we are talking also about identity. When we talk about identity, language is our identity, and also our land is our identity. Now we are facing so much of the crucial stigma between Assam and Meghalaya. And we all know that in the past, we were in the same state of Assam till we were separated for United Khasi and Giant Hills and Assam. But then to the Khasis, to the people of Uhnyautep, we do believe in the, in the word where we say yes means yes and no means no. But in today's world, we need things to be proved. Even if I say yes, in those 52 years ago, I mean, those people who had agreed to have this border for Meghalaya and this border for Assam. But then, today, we are in a dilemma because we don't have the papers with us, which we cannot claim. This is the boundary of that state and this is the boundary of the other state. Likewise, I'm talking also regarding the Bangladesh border and other borders, because even our state falls into so many borders, like what Kokrajhar also has the border of Bengal and the border of Bhutan. So, but then, it depends on the wisdom of our political leaders also to make a peace between one state and the other state, between one community and the other communities, because we all need peace. And, as a literary person, we understand that we want to write something which will be inclusive, which will be represented for the voiceless people, for the underprivileged, for the problems, for the issues, for the challenges that we face. And in this way, we also want to address about gaining peace again, like we lived in the past. And coming to this festival, this is my second invitation, in fact, 2016. Unfortunately, I just sent my 2 Khasi writers because I was unable. Simultaneously, I had another program at the time, so I wasn't able to attend. But then somehow, I mean 2021. But then somehow today, this time, the 4th Kokrajhar Festival, I planned not to miss it, though I'm very, very tired. I've been journeying from 8th of January till now. But then I said, no, I should go. I should meet my fellow writers' friends, because I find that, by listening to their writings, by listening to their presentations, by listening to their voices, we get something new, we get something that we are satisfied, we get something that we can carry forward, and we also can exchange ours to our fellow writers. So to end my speech here, I would just like to say, when we talk of peace, let us begin from ourselves. I would like to quote Mother Teresa, who says, peace begins with a smile. Peace begins with a smile. So to me, I used to say, just yesterday, just today only, there was one message after I posted some of the pictures, in my status. They asked me, Madam, you're always happy. I said, yes, I'm always happy, because in all my photographs I smile. So yes, I do believe in what Mother Teresa says, that peace begins with smile. Let us give peace to one another. Let us own and sustain our identity through our writings, through our voices, but let us also respect. Yesterday I talked little about it. Let us also respect, the identity of other communities. In that way, we will be able to exchange our peace. We can also, continue to have the sense of humanity off and on as we are living a good human, and an example also for the younger generations. The younger generations may not be able to have the same feelings. It means, the reading culture like we, the elderly people, the senior people have. But then we would like also to teach them, love your own language, love your own culture. There is a saying, when the language lives, continue to live, when the language exists, the race will never die. The race will never die. When the race will never die, that means we continue on. Sometimes I envy, the three languages of the Northeast, Assamese, the Bodo, and the Meitei, Manipuri, because they have been included in the 8th schedule of the Constitution of India. We are still struggling. 42 years we have, struggling a lot to, not 42 years, in fact 42 years only from the Khasi Otho Society, but 72 years we have been saying again and again, where is the borderline that we could not accomplish, to get recognized our Khasi language, our Garo language into the 8th schedule of the Constitution of India. I hopefully that one fine time we will have that, because we do have the linguistic affinity with other Indian languages. And I believe that I had been chosen, way back in 2018 as the ambassador of peace for linguistic affinities among the lady poets of India. So we have so many. I'm not saying that men are not good poets. We are all good writers in our own way, in our own caliber. But then we should also say that we are the ambassador of peace. So I wish Bodoland to continue having peace, not only in this generation, but for the future generation as well. So thank you so much for pleasant listening. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. It was so pleasant to listen to your voice. Now, may I please again request Dr. Mary Kim Hokip. We all know we pray to the Almighty so that peace may prevail in one of our sister state, Manipur. As it has been said, that the 8 states northeastern states, now it is known as Astha Lakshmi. Astha Lakshmi means the place where there should be prosperity. Then only the country will prosper. So can I please request Dr. Hokip to just give a few messages so that through literature we can convey our peace process, and can we think and initiate so that through literature we can work out if peace can prevail in Manipur. Thank you.
When Madam asked me to speak again, I was saying to myself, I'm a victim, so how should I be speaking about peace? I expect the other people to, speak on my behalf, but since Madam has requested me, let me speak again. And I will begin with a proverb that is there in my language, which says, Song pi song niawinathe. So like I resonate with Sir when he said that the minorities should not be suppressed. For peace and progress, in the proverb, it says that the small pebbles also can make the big rock stand. You need that small pebbles for the big rock to be firm. So similarly, even minority communities are also part and parcel of the larger community. When the larger community suppress the minority, there is no peace. So for peace to prevail, coexistence is important. And like Madam has said, that we need to understand ourselves first. Once we understand our language, our culture, and once we value them, we also learn to appreciate and understand and tolerate the differences that are there in other people. India is a diverse country. So if I say that my community is the best and the rest are not good, that's not what is expected of a good human being. A person, for me, I feel, is that we should love ourselves. We should love our culture. We should love our language. At the same time, we also need to understand that there are also others who equally love their language, their culture, their land. And once that understanding and respect is there, there cannot be violence. There cannot be lack of peace. We don't need other people to come and speak peace for us. Once we learn to live with tolerance, with love, with respect, with mutual coexistence, peace will naturally fall in place. The problem with this present generation is that we have already lack of knowledge of our own identity and culture. At the same time, we also have learned to disrespect others. So if the role can be reversed, then peaceful coexistence will be there and violence will automatically stop. And like the proverb, we also need the majority to, the bigger community to uplift the downtrodden, the weaker, not to push them, not to suppress them. Once that is done, I am sure that peace will exist everywhere, not only in Northeast, but right now, when Madam said, I envy Bodo community, I also would say that I envy Krokrajar, because when I came, it was so peaceful. In Manipur, I cannot go to Manipur for the last 3 years. I cannot go to my home. I have no access to the Imphal airport, because I may not come back alive. So when I could travel at night to this place, I said, I wish I was from this place. That is the kind of feeling we have, because we really need that. And my last message would be, like Madam said, peace will begin with a smile. I would say that peace begins with me. If we expect the other people to change or to bring peace, it's not going to be possible. But if all of us here, writers, academicians, students, everyone, take this pledge that I will do my bit to bring peace, and let not others, but me, let the change, let the peace begin from me. Once that is there, and if all of us sitting in this room take that pledge that, yes, peace is the need of the hour. Peace is the only means to progress. And if we take this pledge now that I will do my part to bring peace, then peace will come. This is my hope and my dream. Thank you so much, Gazintang. Thank you.
Thank you so much, madam. We can really understand because we face the same sort of situation and we know well. But now, with the initiative and all the challenges that we faced, we overcame these challenges, and today we are we are in such a situation where you feel like, wish my place would be like Kokrajhar. But decades back, or a few years back, we felt the same feeling. We used to, like whenever we were given a bad name, even in the medias and all, we used to just try to convey. When the media used to just refer the whole community as Bodo militants, we used to try to convey, we are not militants. We are a civilized race. We are all civilized people. Please try to understand. And now, because of our third Bodo Peace Accord, we are really privileged. We really feel lucky that we are in a situation where we are in such an environment where we are inviting our esteemed writers and from the earth sectors to come and share your ideas, share your knowledge with us in Bodoland so that we can sustain peace and harmony. And we are very thankful to all our revered speakers who are in the dais. We are thankful to our esteemed writers, distinguished guests, dear students who are here and who have listened to our discussion. And now we pray to the Almighty so that peace prevail across the globe, peace prevail across our nation. We are speaking about Vikshit Bharat. Until and unless we are really at peace, until and unless all our, every citizens get their constitutional right, we cannot speak about, or we cannot think about the peace that we are speaking about. Let us pray so that peace prevail in our entire Northeast. Let us pray so that peace prevail in Bodoland territorial region as well, everywhere. And we thank you, and let me finish of today's session of Writers Confluence, a candid dialogue with esteemed guests, with a quote by father of our nation, Mahatma Gandhi: "The day the power of love overrules, the love of power, the world will know peace." Thank you so much. Gazanthang. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mrs. Pratibha Bromo, for chairing the session, and Ma'am Dr. Hawkin for co-chairing the session, and all the esteemed speakers here. My deep gratitude and appreciation to all of you. Thank you. And the next session will be on Tales from Assam's Bodo Heartland, Whistles of Sipung, and this will be coordinated by Dr. Ashok Bromo. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have another session now. That is Tales from Assam's Bodo Heartland, Whistles of Sipung. So before I'm going to start the session, we have a Bodo group dance by Bodoland Cultural Center, Rampolville, Kokrajhar. So I request the cultural team to prepare for their dance.
Hello, hello, check, hello. Hello, 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 check, hello. Check, hello. Barap, barap, seja.
जोबोद जोबोद गोजोननाय थाबाय बड'लेण्ड कालचारेल सेन्टार रामफलबिल क'क्राझारनिफ्राय बिथांमोनहा मोजाङै जोंनो मोसानानै दिन्थिलांबाय दा बेखिनियाव जोंहा थिखानाय समफारि बायदियै टेल्स फ्रम आसाम बड'लेण्ड हार्टलेण्ड हुइसेल्स अफ सिफुं बे जासिगोन जोंनिया दा बेखिनियाव जोंनि पेनेलिस्ट हिसाबै दङ रश्मि नार्जारी मेडाम आरो डक्टर जितुमणि बसुमतारी मेडाम दा बिथांमोनखौहाय आङो जोंनि जौस्राङावहाय बेजोंनो लोगोसे जोंनि फरायसा भलुन्टियार्स बिथांमोनखौ मेडाममोनखौ आर'नाइजों बरायनानै लानो आङो गुरैयै खावलायबाय। Rosmi Narzari is an Indian writer of Bodo origin who writes in English language, a dog lover at heart, an author by fashion,
a creative writing mentor and independent editor by profession. She is best known for her children's book, His Share of Sky 2012, for which she won Saito Academy Award in 2016. Her debut novel, Bloodstone Legend of the Last Engraving, is a literally, socially, and academically acclaimed work that has inspired research paper on gender studies. Thank you, Madam, for accepting our RNI and then share. And now we have another finalist, Dr. Jitamani Bosumatari. Dr. Jitamani Bosumatari is an assistant professor in the Department of English, Cotton University. She did her PhD from Guwahati University, 2003. She has contributed articles to various journals and title magazines on her research interests. Her other interests are theater and translation, and she has scripted 2 plays in Bodo and has translated Bodo poetry and fiction into English and many others. Thank you very much. Now I call upon Dr. Rosmi Narzari and Dr. Jitamani Madam to share the discussion, please.
Thank you. A very warm evening to one and all gathered here. I would have accidentally started with good afternoon because that was when our session was scheduled. So here we are. I have the privilege to be sitting with Rosmi Narzari, as it is always. She is the author of His Share of Sky, Bloodstone, A Legend, An Unfinished Search, among many others. She won the Sahitya Academy Award in 2016 for His Share of Sky. Writing in English, she is one of the very few, in fact, a handful of Bodo writers writing in English, and which is why she is special to us. So my first question to you would be about your variety of themes, starting from His Share of Sky to An Unfinished Search, and then Whistles of the Sifu. You have traveled from children's literature to mythology to history, right? So I would want to know how is this choice of themes, this variety of choice, intentional? Is it deliberate? And also, over the years, how have you evolved as a writer?
Thank you, Jitu. Very good afternoon to all of you. First of all, let me ask you a question, if it's okay. Have you all had lunch? Have you all had lunch? Can I see hands up, please, if you've had lunch? I've had mine too. And if you fall asleep, I wouldn't mind. That's okay, because post-lunch sessions are kindly drowsy, but never mind. Now I'm being asked about the themes of my books, about my stories. So I don't think it was planned. For me, my family, my friends, they all say that, be careful what you tell Rashmi, because the next moment she will translate that into a story. She'll cook up her own imagination in between and put you as the protagonist of her story. So be careful when she's around. So this is the reputation I have at home. That means whatever I see around, maybe this very moment, when I'm here amongst you all, there is a story conjuring up in my mind. So this is how I think I have all themes. I see children playing, I see stories in them. And an unfinished search actually happened when my husband had to go on a visit. He was in the Home Department of the government of Assam, so he had to go on a border visit to Malegarh, the war memorial in Karimganj district. So that's a border between Assam and Bangladesh. And this particular war memorial is less known. It is not as famous as the war memorials in Digboy or in Nagaland. So I thought there must be so many of them martyrs lying there with their secrets buried with them. So that very moment, a story came up to my mind with the protagonist having no identity of his own. He said he was born, he lived through his entire life, and he died in that same place, not budging an inch from his ancestral land. But that particular land had moved on from India to Pakistan to Bangladesh. So his address had changed, not by lanes or by district, but by nations, whereas he had been within those same latitudes and longitudes. So this is what prompted my theme of that historical fiction. And Bloodstone, Legend of the Last Engraving, which is a mythological fiction, came to my mind when coming back from Kamakhya temple one day, driving down the hillock. Those small pieces of red cloth that the pujaris, the priests, hand over to you as a part of the prasad. It is called the Angodak. It is supposed to be red because of the drenched blood of the Devi's menstruation. However, when I saw that piece of cloth, I saw that it was nothing much, just a piece of gaja sea gaja. Sab pieces khalamna nahi beko prasajang huyar. Small pieces of that red cloth given with the prasad as part of the Devi's menstrual blood. So then again I thought, because our younger generation will not know about these legends of the Kamakhya, about the history of the Kamakhya. So to make it more interesting and intriguing for them, let us turn history and fiction together and make it more interested for the younger people. So they'll get attracted to know about what the Kamakhya is really about. So this is Kamakhya. And the theme of my Sahitya Academy award-winning book, His Share of Sky. Should I tell Henry? Yes, my husband is here. It is about his childhood mischiefs and anecdotes when he was around 10 years old. He once fell into a well, then he ran out of school and bunked classes and so many things. And of course, I wove into his childhood stories. I made my own fiction, and he later on went ahead to get into the IAS, but that's a different story altogether. What is more intriguing is his childhood stories, which is what I want little children to know, that even if he bunked classes, it is nature that taught him so much. It is not always that lessons are learned within the four walls of a classroom, upon a black or a white board. The more basic, essential, and sustainable education is got from outside the four walls. So these are the themes. And when His Share of Sky got really so much acclaim, I thought, why not make that 10-year-old boy into a 60-plus old man, have two more friends with him, and write something interesting. So this is how Whistles of the Sifung came into my mind. And the 60-year-old man, he is called Ojhai, and he has two friends, Deimalu and Birkhang. So all three of them are together in these anecdotes, in these escapades. Ojhai plays the sifung. For us, it is the wand of heaven, the flute. For the Boros, we play the sifung by blowing into it. That is, we put our soul into the sifung to appease the gods. Without the flute, without the sifung, we proceed with no ritual, no celebration, no grief, no mourning, nothing. For every moment of our lives, it is the sifung which is with us. And along with the sifung, it is the kham. You had just seen this lovely band playing just now. The long drums, those are the khams. So one of Ojhai's friends plays the kham, and the third plays the jotha. Jotha is a pair of cymbals. It is not here, but jotha is the pair of cymbals. And the tale bearer, she tells a little boy that jaw means together and tha means stay. It may not be precisely that, but the tale bearer interprets about the jotha to the little boy that it is stay together. That is how you create music of peace, of love. And of course, we also have the serja, but those are side characters in this book. And please tell me if I take too long in answering. Yes.
So, truly speaking, Whistles of the Sifung is a wonderful tale that weaves one's communion, a tribe's communion with nature, the importance of musical instruments in the society. It seems to weave a very timeless and ancient story. It may belong to any time. It may not belong to, it might be very, very ancient. However, at the same time, we also see it being very contemporary because you also bring in the corona, the lockdown period. You also bring contemporary issues like the Bodo-Santhal conflict and how after the conflict, Ojhai seemed to remember that there was a time when the Santhalis and the Bodos would be together, but there has been a gap in that relationship. So it has been wonderfully woven. I would want to know, so you said that you wanted to let the young boy from his share of sky grow into a 60-plus man. But I would want to know if what was really the inspiration behind this book, and if you really have to do some research coming back. I mean, you stay in Guwahati, and did you have to come back and do your research, or did you have to listen to stories from others? Because you have a range of, it's really a kaleidoscope of the Bodo culture, of Bodo folk culture, right? So from our Domasi to Kerai worship to Haraibanka, right? All the tales come into play within the text. So I would want to know how much research you had to do to know all of that.
Not much of a research because I am a Bodo, wherever I am. So wherever I am, I celebrate Domasi. Of course, we wouldn't be going for community fishing and all, which is part of the stories. But yeah, a little bit of asking around. When I come to Gosaigaon, when I go to my husband's ancestral place in Bhaulaguri, so he comes back home and tells me stories. We had this Ayong, we had that Made. Ayong, for those not initiated into the Boro terminology, Ayong is uncle, and Made is auntie. So he would be coming back and telling me, this Ade had this story to tell, that Ade had a vision of a ghost. So that kind of research, and sometimes, of course, a lot I already know because I'm a Boro. And some I have noticed for the legends, it is universal. Maybe we just call them by different names. Some time back, I was at a seminar, and one of the Swiss delegates there was telling us about some legends, which is kind of similar to one of the Assamese legends. So I think folk tales and legends are kindly universal. So what I did was I did not exactly write about the folk tales. I did not translate these into English. I just got my inspiration. I took the legends, I created my own characters, and made them flow through these legends. So youngsters staying outside the region should know about their legends, and I think more than research papers, more than academic study, people find stories more interesting to relate to, irrespective of age bars. So I think when I wrote this book, and now I get answers and I get mails from all across, from all over. This is so interesting. I can relate to this. We have something similar to our clan, our custom. So I think this is what is research. You collect stories, and because I am not exactly translating them, and one of my purposes of writing this book was that if we write and borrow and keep it amongst ourselves, it is like I'm telling my own family about, I'm telling my husband about me. My husband is telling about himself to me. It is like that. But if I tell about us to the people outside in a language they understand, I think that way we carry more of our culture to the global platform. I am writing our songs, our prayers, first in our language, and then very close interpretation of that into English, and some of these are in the book. So this is one of my ways of carrying my culture to the global platform. So a little bit of research. The internet is there. A lot of people I know, I have talked, but more than the internet, for these kind of researchers, I think it is always good to talk to very, very old people in the villages. They have wonderful stories to tell, more wonderful than what is written here. I think if you get an opportunity, reach out to people, because they don't have too much time. And once they're gone, they'll be taking the secrets with them. So we need to reach out to them. Research, this is research, yes.
So talking about audience, did you intentionally have an audience when you were writing Whistles of the Sifung? I see two kinds of audience. If I look at the book, then I see that you are speaking to one, those who do not know the Bodo culture, those who are outside, obviously, because you're writing in English. And there is a constant, you say you didn't translate, but I see a constant translation happening throughout the text. I'll talk about that later on. The other thing that I see is, I saw in the prelude itself, when Asido Buri begins to speak, she begins by saying, long, long ago, and she's telling a story to Bodosa, who is a Bodo child. So I see two audiences here. One, somebody who has no access to Bodo culture, and the other is the younger generation of Bodos who perhaps do not read Bodo anymore, do not understand the culture anymore, but perhaps who, if they read this kind of a book, then they would perhaps learn. So your comment on that.
This is precisely it. Those two were my target audiences. Bodosa is also a metaphor for every Boro person. And yes, of course, it is for those who are not really affiliated to the Boro culture, the Boro language, those staying outside who want to know about us, and also the younger generation of the Boros. So yes, that's the target. I did not exactly have anything in mind, but I think for all story writers, it is the same. When we start writing, we don't plan anything. Things just begin to take their own course somewhere along. Yeah.
I am looking at the book and I see the cover. Whistles of the Sifung is written in tiny, smaller font, and the subtitle, Tales from Assam's Bodo Heartland, is bold and big for everybody to see. That's the first thing everyone sees before seeing the first title. So between you and Om Books, I want you to share with us what were the decisions, what went into the decision to have this kind of a design.
Okay, if you don't take this out of this hall, would you promise me you'll keep your secret? Yes, okay, thank you. Now I can tell you. My idea was Whistles of the Sifung in bold and big, and Tales from Assam's Bodo Heartland, slightly smaller. But then again, whatever you write, it is always the market that plays a major chunk of the role. So this was the publisher's decision that Tales from Assam's Bodo Heartland should be bigger. I tried to put in my foot there, but they said, Rashmi, let it be. You want your book to be read? I said, yes, I want my book to be read. Then let us take at least this call. We're not touching anything in the editing. Every word, every comma, everything is just in place, but let us take the role of the cover because the book needs to go out and reach a wider audience, a wider readership. I said, okay, that's how.
And I believe that was a wonderful decision because when someone says whistles of the Sifung, they may not understand what Sifung means. But when they see Tales from Assam's Bodo Heartland, they would want to see what the Bodo Heartland has to say.
Exactly,
And
exactly.
I think I was telling my mother-in-law, like, if you take a movie outside, an Indian movie that is to be represented outside, what would the Western world want to see about India? And you see everything that the Western world want to see about India being represented in that essentialized text. So what I see is, perhaps I would not say it in the negative sense, but you would see everything essentially Bodo within this text, of course, because it is set in the village, but also certain markings, for example, what defines a Bodo life? And then you have the village life, the community fishing, the zoo, which is so intrinsically part of our culture. And then you have not changed, you have not translated many of those words, which is why I said I would come to a translation. I see a constant translation happening throughout the text. And because you mention a word, for example, kurei, and then there is Zoukure, and there is a translation happening within the text itself. Nobody even would know that there is a translation happening. At least a keen eye would know that, but not anybody else. So I want your comment on your choice of that style of writing. I mean, I see Mitra Fakon among ourselves. When she's writing, she's constantly translating, right? A translation is happening in the text. There's a very unique way of Indian writing in English, right? And if you see Amitabh Ghosh, he has sprinkles of Bangla words throughout, let's say, The Hungry Tide. You have sprinkles of Bodo words throughout Whistles of the Sifung. So please comment on that, your choice of language. And again, was it a very deliberate choice to put in those words and then translate it in that manner and not footnote them?
This is going to be a longish kind of answer. If you can bear with me, please. These are stories which are universal, perhaps. Whatever Ojhai has done in his setup, in his village, I think so many villagers in the Northeast, old people in the Northeast, or maybe across the world in rural setups would have done. So that naming Ojhai, I could have named him George, I could have named him Yusuf, I could have named him Sanjeev, but I chose to name him Ojhai because my setup is Bodo, which is a translation. A name will not translate itself. But then this is a kind of caring that these tales are related to the Bodo Heartland. And then what you're talking about Jokure and other settings, other songs. Once actually, I think all eminent writers will know here, not eminent, everyone who has a knack for writing will know that once we place ourselves in a setting, the flow automatically comes to you. And when I am in the Bodo setup, when I am writing about a community fishing, I think my mindset automatically is there. It is not in the fish market in a city. It is not in the fish market in Uzan Bazaar in Guwahati. My mindset is in the pond of a Bodo village. So I think automatically it takes that turn. So I don't write about English ponds. So this is, I think, automatically there. And talking about Jokure, which she mentions, that is in the forthcoming book. Yes.
Since we are talking about the way you have used language in the text, would you please read excerpts from there where you have borrow words sprinkled so that we get a taste of what the book is like?
Most importantly, for most of our people, I think, before I read a passage, I'll tell you for us, if we say she's very pretty, that means she's pretty. But if our people need to say that she's really very pretty, she's the prettiest, they will say, "Aya, she's so pretty." They'll say this. And otherwise, "Aya, she's so pretty."
So between these two, you will have to understand. So we are
A lot of facial expression, body language, hand gestures, and the written language comes
so much later. I think because ours was mostly for a long time oral tradition.
This is why this happens. So here, and for exclamations, we use ayu habab. That is an exclamation with us. So I did not exactly, okay. There is a passage in Flame, I think.
So since we'll take some time finding the passage, you have found it?
Okay, here's one. Porbot chorayo dongpang dana tangbla, sal gande makhu angne, dana labe nanghanai. Anyone here? Anyone here? Anyone here? Abo? Oh yes, that will be wonderful. Shall we? Shall we? Anybody, please?
Seems to be a lucky turn of events. We have the singer here.
This is lovely.
Dongphang laina thangla.
Porbot chorayo.
Dongphang laina thangla. There's a song.
I'm very much not sure, actually. And I'm not a singer. Okay. Porbot jorau, dongphang danne tangbela, sal jora, maku jora, labe ada, laru bandaru, labe ada, laru bandaru. De labe genage bibenango dais. Like this. Okay, well.
So this song, I have kept it just like that, and I have put in a translation. The translation goes as, this is what the beloved tells her husband. She says, to Porbot chorayo, when you go to gather wood, do fetch for me without fail sal wood for my spindle, so she can weave at her loom. Then Ojai, this is about Ojai's wife. She is no more. So Ojai remembers his wife singing this song for him. And then Ojai replies, "Gladly I shall, my beloved, my precious. I shall fetch wood for your spindle, but you, my dear, keep ready sweet wine for me." Like she said, you know, Joe, the rice beer that we ferment, that we brew in our homes, is essential to all our rituals, to our lives, to our lives, yes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So this is what I put a part of these, and then our famous Bagurumba. We are sometimes synonymous with the Bagurumba. So that entire song I put just like that, and then I put a translation of it. That's it.
So the entire book is sprinkled not only with Bodo words, but also Bodo songs, which are intrinsically part of our culture. Having said that...
And then there are also Bodo prayers.
Prayers.
Yes. Bodo prayers are also mixed here, about how 5 is a very precious number for us. Yeah.
So having said that, when the melody of the Sifung, Kam, and Zotha, it runs throughout the text, throughout the book, and it weaves a beautiful landscape of the Bodo world, like I said, the quintessentially Bodo world. So for the uninitiated, I would want you to elaborate a little bit on, again, the significance of these 3 instruments in the text. What is Ojai capable of doing with the Sifung? One, there is a realism where Sifung is part of our culture, and Ojai plays it during Kerai worship, during Bihu, Baisagu, Domasi, so on and on. But there is also a magic realism going on here, and Ojai plays it to appease, to calm down the Haraibanka. And there we see the magic and the reality coming together. So please, your comments on that.
This is a very comical part of it, you know, about the Haraibanka. Haraibanka is... Haraibanke, yes. So this is, I think, a lot of people were trying to give me scientific explanations about that flame, orbs of flame. In fallow lands, we see them hopping from one place to another, then suddenly they disappear, and then all of a sudden they'll be appearing from far away. Maba pipang niprai nohomba isigajan gajan niprai are nogan are gumagan. It'll disappear. It will appear from the top of trees like that. So, but my concept was that, no, I don't want any scientific explanation here. I want it to be magic. So that is one thing, but what's more important is I want you to know how Ojai I'm just telling you how Ojai drew his sifung, the flute, gently to his lips, like he would his lover's slender wrist. As he talked to Birkhang, Ojai and his sifung together created such soulful music that it made every spirit and human, bird and beast, plant and pebble, virtuous or vicious, fall under a spell when notes from his sifung brushed past them, leaving them craving for more. The most obstinate of elements yielded to the charm of those notes. As Ojai closed his eyes and played, the notes from his sifung cascaded gently through the tranquil winter night, across freshly harvested fields of rice and mist-filmed ponds of catfish and snakehead. He played for a while and then, pausing to look at it, said, "Life is a barter. Plant a bamboo, and you get a flute in return. It's all a give and take. You give something to life, and you get something out of it." And there is emotions of all sorts. Haraibanka is one of them. It creates some kind of an eerie happening. And then there is this story about a Domasi celebration where there is a mischievous crab. It gets into someone's rear, it gets stuck into someone's rear, gets into someone's garment at all the wrong places. So then also Ojai had to play his flute to appease the crab and set the fire aglow. So Ojai Sifung has also enthralled snakes, reptiles, and a whole lot of other elements.
Right, so I guess it's time for the last question, because there are sessions after us and we are way beyond our schedule. So before coming to the last question, I would begin with a quote by Gulzar. If there is a cosmos within a cosmos, a universe within a universe, it's in the storytelling by Rashmi Narjari. She takes you across infinite times. The book ends, the story does not. Would you give us of course you cannot tell us everything about it, but would you give us a small glimpse into that cosmos?
This forthcoming book is called The Lost Soul of the Jokure. Jokure, Jo is, of course, our wine, and Kure is the bowl. So this is about a soul which is lost from a Kure, from the shivling of a Bato temple in a Boro village in the foothills of the Bhutan borders. And then this soul emerges somewhere else, and then it goes to a Gompa in the higher Himalayas. Then there are magically realistic animals of a squirrel, a rooster, and a spider. So they are from the Jataka era. They get back together to bring the soul, and whether the soul actually comes back to the Bato temple or stays back in the Gompa, that is the story about. So Gulzar Saab actually got to read Whistles of the Sifung, and he calls me and says, Rashmi, I'm really, I'm really feeling so good about the prelude, especially the talebearer. She is called Asido Buri. Do in my language is 6, and Asi means fingers. So Asido Buri has 6 fingers. I have 5. She has 2 thumbs in each hand. So she is known as Asido Buri, and she is the talebearer in this particular book. So Gulzar Saab really liked the prelude, and then he says, let me know about your other books. And so when I told him about the Jokure, and I said, I know I'm asking for too much, but will it be all right if you can please write a few words of appreciation? And 2 days later, he calls me and says, Rashmi, read it if it's okay. So that's how, this is the cosmos of my forthcoming book, The Lost Soul of the Jokure. We were planning for a release here at the Kokrajhar Lit Fest, but somehow for publishing logistics and a whole lot of other things, it could not happen. But of course, this book is, again, dedicated to young readers.
So I guess it's a jewel on our crown for one of our Bodo writers to be commented upon in such a manner by Gulzar Saab. With the lost soul of Jokure, that means we'll have to do a lot of time travel from the animals of the Jakarta, Jataka tales, and all right. So looking forward to that next book, and I guess with this, I'll open the floor for questions. If there is anybody among the audience who would want to ask questions, and since you can see us in Dokhna, so we are open to 2 languages, Bodo and English.
We are open to 2 more, I think.
2 more?
We are open to Hindi.
In fact, 3 more.
We are open to Hindi, we are open to Ohomia, we are open to Bangla. Yes. And we're open to any language if it relates to literature. We are open to body language and gestures. We will understand and we will try to answer accordingly. Thank you so much.
Any questions from the audience?
No questions,
No
is a
questions?
good thing for me. This is the most critical time for an author, I think, and every time I say, for an author, writing a book is the easiest part of writing a book. And then on the publishing, the promotion, and especially this question-answer round is the most crucial. You know, I get jitters in the knees, my knees shake. What kind of questions may be fielded to me? But since no questions are there, I have passed my exam. I take it that way.
You are saved.
I am saved.
So I guess with this, we come to the end of the session. A very warm gratitude towards Kokrajhar Lit Fest for having us here. We are honored to be invited, and thank you.
And right at the beginning, I asked you about your lunch because food is very precious to all Boros. Please enjoy your dinner. Thank you so much.